Hello everybody, welcome to this journey. We're reading Sir Gibbie. We're getting back into this book. It's by George MacDonald. It's from the 1800s. Here's the ocean. There's a sort of a cloud layer today. There's Leia, she's watching over us. She's protecting us. Here's the sun. All right, George MacDonald was C.S. Lewis's spiritual mentor. C.S. Lewis was best friends with Tolkien, the guy that wrote The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien brought C.S. Lewis back to Christianity, and Lewis wrote the Narnia books and all these other books like The Problem of Pain and Mere Christianity, and all of these wonderful, amazing books because he had a photographic memory. I met his stepson, Douglas, and I worked for the C.S. Lewis Foundation, so C.S. Lewis has been a major part of my life, but he said every one of his books, he quoted directly or indirectly George MacDonald, and so we can't go wrong. Madeleine L'Engle, the woman that wrote A Wrinkle in Time, said, I got to take a writing course with her in England. She went over for a C.S. Lewis conference. Anyway, she said that the best thing about C.S. Lewis was that he introduced her to George MacDonald. And C.S. Lewis said about George MacDonald, I put it in the descriptions in these videos, is that he never met an author more close to the spirit of Christ. So I don't know what it was about George MacDonald that made him this way, but his family faced lots of hardships. He was poor much of his life. Anyway, you don't have to be poor to go through hardships. But nevertheless, you understand about fasting and leaning on God. Anyway, I'll just continue with the story. Sir Gibbie is this young boy who lost his father and his mother. His father was a drunk, so he lost his father to alcoholism, pretty much. His father just died about 2 of our sessions ago. But just trust that you're here now for a reason and that there's something to be told us. You know, Jesus spoke in parables. And so I find as a psychologist in my day job that oftentimes when we enter into story, they help us in the most unexpected ways in our journey of life. All right, so much love, and let's get into it. Let's see how I set this up. I didn't check it yet. I think there's the marks for my tripod last time. All right, I'll turn it a little towards the ocean, and maybe the sun will dry up that marine layer. Let's see if I can brighten it or... Well, it just is what it is. You're seeing clouds now. Now you hardly can see the ocean. That's funny. All right, well, we made it all the way up here. Let's start. Leia, don't go back there because you'll knock over the thing. All right. I do this oftentimes to show that we're starting the book now. We're on chapter XI, so chapter 11. Turn it up to 11. It's called Janet. All right. Once away, Gibbie had no thought of returning. Up Doorside was the sole propulsive force whose existence he recognized. But when he lifted his head from drinking at the stream, which was one of some size and greatly refreshed, looked up its channel, a longing seized him to know whence came the water of life, which had thus restored him to bliss, how a burn first appears upon the earth. Burn, B-U-R-N. It's like a, anyway, like the beginning of a river. I don't know. Leia, stay. Wow, the sage and rosemary, whatever's up here, smells so good. because I was running part the way to get up here, so it cleared my nostrils. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah. You spilled your water. Come on. Sorry about that, y'all. All right. Upon the earth. He thought it might come from the foot of a great conical mountain, which seemed but a little way off. He would follow it up and see. So away he went, yielding at once. As was his wont, all over the city he would just go wherever he wanted. He's, anyway, I don't like labeling people. You'll find out. He's mute, he can't speak, and he walks on his tiptoes, and he's, different to regular people in the city, and they thought he wasn't smart, but his dad knew he could comprehend. He's very smart, but anyway. So away he went, yielding at once, as was his wont, to the first desire that came. He had not trotted far along the bank, however, before at a sharp turn it took. He saw that its course was a much longer one than he had imagined, for it turned from the mountain and led up among the roots of other hills. While here in front of him, direct from the mountain, as it seemed, came down a smaller stream and tumbled noisily into this. The larger burn would lead him too far from the Dower. He would follow the smaller one. He found a wide, shallow place, crossed the larger, and went up the side of the smaller. Doubly free after his imprisonment of the morning. Oh, because he was stuck in the barn, and they were knocking out the chaff in this barn, and he didn't know how he was going to get out. Here they are. What are these cars? I hope they're not coming down here. It looks like they are. We'll see. Whatever. We go with the flow. We learn. I already prayed, Lord, bless every single person here. Bless this reading. Bless this book. Bless George MacDonald as he's writing it back in time. Thank you for this moment that we could all be together and enter into this story. Thank you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. And I welcome people of all faiths. This is just how I pray. Because, anyway, welcome. Leia, scoot back. Okay. Gibbie sped joyously along. Already nature, her largeness, her openness, her loveliness, her changefulness, her oneness in change, had begun to heal the child's heart and comfort him in his disappointment with his kind. He had to flee the city because something violent happened a few chapters ago, or like two readings ago. Anyway, the stream he was now ascending ran along a claw of the mountain, which claw was covered with almost a forest of pine, protecting little colonies of less hardy timber. Its heavy green was varied with the pale, delicate fringes of the fresh foliage of the larches, filling the air with an aromatic breath. Just like I was just saying, I didn't know. In the midst of their soft tufts, each tuft buttoned with a brown spot, hung the rich brown knobs and tassels of last year's cones, pine cones. But the trees were all on the opposite side of the stream and appeared to be mostly on the other side of a wall. Where Gibbie was, the mountain route was chiefly of rock, interspersed with heather. Come here, Leia. No. Oh, gosh. She's exploring. I'm at a weird, I don't know what the time is, why the sun's making me just in the dark, or where I'm sitting, or anyway. A little way up the stream, he came to a bridge over it, closed at the farther end by iron gates between pillars, each surmounted by a wolf's head in stone. Over the gate on each side leaned a rowan tree with trunk and branches aged and gnarled amidst their fresh foliage. He crossed the burn to look through the gate and pressed his face between the bars to get a better sight of a tame rabbit that had got out of its hutch. It sat like a druid, white with age, in the midst of a gravel drive much overgrown with moss that led through a young larchwood with here and there an ancient tree, lonely amidst the youth of its companions. Suddenly from the wood a large spaniel came bounding up upon the rabbit. You know, a cocker spaniel, right? A dog. Like mine. Look at her. Anyway. Gibbie gave a shriek, and the rabbit made one white flash into the wood, with the dog after him. He turned away, sad at heart. Little creature it can, he said to himself. Ates like a creature it canna. I don't know, and sometimes I don't know the Scottish. There's a man that translated this for us, but you have to pay for his book. So I did, but it's on my anyway, Kindle. I can't read it because then it's his. Anyway, this is free domain because it's from the 1800s, but not. Anyway, whatever. Oftentimes I show it. If you want to translate it in the comments, you're welcome to. It's in the middle of this page, or the first of this second paragraph. Anyway. It was his first generalization, but not many years passed before he supplemented it with a conclusion. But the man would be a man, manna. That would be very helpful if we knew it, but all right. Resuming his journey of investigation, he trotted along the bank of the burn, farther and farther up, until he could trot no more, but must go clambering over great stones or sinking to the knees in bog, patches of it red with iron, from which he would turn away with a shudder, because it looked like blood to him, and he had seen them commit bloodshed to this man. So he has a little bit of PTSD from it, but he left the city. Now he's in the countryside. Sometimes he walked in the water along the bed of the burn itself. Sometimes he had to scramble up its steep side and pass one of the many little cataracts of its descent. Here and there a small silver birch or a mountain ash or a stunted fir tree looked like a wizard child hung over the stream. Its banks were mainly of rock and heather, but now and then a small patch of cultivation intervened. Gibbie had no thought that he was gradually leaving the abodes of men behind him. He knew no reason why in ascending things should change. And be no longer as in plainer ways. For what he knew, there might be farm after farm, up and up forever to the gates of heaven. But it would no longer have troubled him greatly to leave all houses behind him for a season. A great purple foxglove could do much now, just at this phase of his story, to make him forget, not the human face divine, but the loss of it. A lark aloft in the blue, from whose heart, as from a fountain, whose roots were lost in the air, its natural source issued not a stream, but an ever-spreading lake of song, was now more to him than the memory of any human voice he had ever heard, except his father's and Sambo's. I guess Sambo would sing to him sometimes too. This man that is now passed. Well, they called him that, but I'm not trying to be derogatory. That's how he knew his name to be. It's not anything. It's just, this is book from the 1800s, and they were ignorant and whatever. Anyway, whatever. But he was not quite out and away from the dwellings of his kind. I may as well now make the attempt to give some idea of Gibbie's appearance, as he showed after so long wandering. Of dress he had hardly enough left to carry the name, so his clothes were worn. The one thing he had was like this overall thing. Shoes, of course, he had none. He never did. And of the shape of trousers, there remained, nothing except division before and behind in the short petticoat to which they were reduced. And those rudimentary divisions were lost in the multitude of rents of equal apparent significance, tears in his clothes. He didn't have a mom to mend his garments, right? He didn't have a father. God was the mother and father of this sparrow. Psalm 27:10. George MacDonald earlier says so. Not the psalm, but the psalm says it. He had never, so far as he knew, had a shirt upon his body, and his sole other garment was a jacket, so much too large for him that to retain the use of his hands, he had folded back the sleeves quite to his elbows. Thus reversed, they became pockets, the only ones he had, and in them he stowed whatever provisions were given him of which he could not make immediate use, porridge and sowens and mashed potatoes included. They served him, in fact, like the first of the stomachs of those animals which have more than one, concerning which animals, by the way, I should much like to know what they were in Pythagoras' time. Wonder why. They have different stomachs, so they store food. And anyway, his head had plentiful protection in his own natural crop of his hair, right? Had never either had or required any other that would have been of gold order had not a great part of the color been sunburnt, rained, and frozen out of it. Always it pointed as if surcharged with electric fluid, crowning him with a wildness that was in an amusing contrast with the placidity of his countenance. He was very chill. He'd been through so much. He saw the ups and downs of life, and he stayed steady. He observed a lot. Anyway, perhaps the resulting queerness in the expression of the little vagrant, a look as if he had been hunted till his body and soul were nearly ruffled asunder and had already parted company in aim and interest, might have been the first thing to strike a careless observer. But if the heart was not a careless one, the eye would look again and discover a stronger stillness than mere placidity, than mere passiveness. He had a stillness inside of him. A sort of live peace, abiding in that weather-beaten little face under its wild crown of human herbage. The features of it were well-shaped and not smaller than proportional to the small whole of his person. His eyes, partly perhaps because there was so little flesh upon his bones, were large, and in repose had much of a soft animal expression. There was not in them the look of you and I, the look of you and I know. Frequently too, there was not in them the look of you and I know. Frequently too, when occasion roused the needful instinct, they had a sharp expression of outlook and readiness, which, without a trace of fierceness or greed, was yet equally animal. He's a bit wild in appearance. The sun is really strong. Maybe it will burn through that marine layer, but it's early in the morning. I had to leave early today. Anyway. Let me find where we were. Without a trace of fierceness or greed, was yet equally animal. Only all the time there was present something else beyond characterization, behind them something seemed to lie asleep. His hands and feet were small, childishly dainty, his whole body well-shaped and well put together, of which the style of his dress rather quashed the evidence. Right? He was so strong from all this running all the time. And anyway, how he would serve in the city by finding things and bringing them to people, or to the caller of the city. I forgot his name. Such was Gibbie to the eye as he rose from Daurside to the last cultivated ground on the borders of the burn, and the highest dwelling on the mountain. It was the abode of a cotter, and was a dependency of the farm he had just left. All right. The cotter was an old man of 70. His wife was nearly 60. They had reared stalwart sons and shapely daughters, now at service here and there in the valleys below, all ready to see God in nature and recognize him in providence. They belonged to a class now, I fear extinct, but once, if my love prejudiced not my judgment too far, for the glory and strength of Scotland, their little acres are now swallowed up in large farms. Wow. There's so much. All of the book could be probably summarized in that sentence. We're of noble descent, and also inglorious, whatever the word is. I don't know. I think I was talking about it yesterday in a video I posted. On interior silence or something, interior something, quietude. I can't remember sometimes. I just go with whatever God wants me to speak as best I can. It was a very humble dwelling, built of turf upon a foundation of stones and roofed with turf and straw, warm and nearly impervious to the searching airs of the mountainside. Wow. One little searching airs, not ears, airs of the mountainside, the cold air, right? One little window of 1.5 feet square looked out on the universe. At one end stood a stack of peat, half as big as the cottage itself. All around it were huge rocks, some of them peaks, whose masses went down to the very central fires. Others only fragments that had rolled from above. Here and there a thin crop was growing in patches amongst them, the red-gray stone lifting its baldness in spots, numberless through the soft, waving green. A few of the commonest flowers grew about the door, but there was no garden. Leia. Anyway, there's a bird nearby. Can you hear? Wow, look, see the valley below by the ocean? Let's see. I'm not sure what I'm getting. I don't think I'm showing the valley. Anyway, there's the sun out. It's strong. Let me see if my camera's getting hot. Oops. I don't want to lose everything here. It's all right. All right. Here and there, a thin crop was growing in patches amongst them. A few of the commonest flowers grew about the door, but there was no garden. A waving green. I just skipped ahead back to where we were. The doorstep was live rock, and a huge projecting rock behind formed the back and a portion of one of the end walls. This latter rock had been the attraction to the site because of a hollow in it, which now served as a dairy, for up there with them lived the last cow of the valley, the cow that breathed the loftiest air on all Daurside. A good cow, and gifted and feeding well upon little. Facing the broad south and leaning against the hill, as against the bosom of God, sheltering it from the north and east, the cottage looked so high, humble, so still, so confident, that it drew Gibbie with the spell of heart-likeness. It was like his heart, right? The cottage was. You'll see. He knocked at the old, weather-beaten, shrunk and rent but well-patched door. A voice alive with the soft vibrations of thought and feeling answered, "Come your ways in, where you be." Come your way in, like basically come in. I want to know Janet's language. I wish I would have gone ahead. I forgot to go ahead and read because sometimes I familiarize myself with how, but we'll do our best. God help us. Because we want to know what she's saying. She's a beautiful woman. I love her. Gibbie pulled the string that came through a hole in the door, so lifting the latch he entered. A woman sat on a creepie, her face turned over her shoulder to see who came. It was a gray face with good, simple features and clear gray eyes. "Oh, you got blue eyes, you got gray eyes." I was learning that song yesterday on my guitar. Thoughts from above, yeah, the people down below. People in this world, they have no place to go. Thoughts from above, yeah, people down below. Anyway, it's a song by New Order. I'm not pushing any new agenda here. I'm just saying that's the name of the band. And it's called Temptation. And I looked it up yesterday. Wow. Anyway, clear gray eyes. The plentiful hair that grew low on her forehead was half gray, mostly covered by a white cap with frills. A clean wrapper and apron, both of blue print, over a blue winsey petticoat, blue stockings, and strong shoes completed her dress. A book lay on her lap. Always, when she had finished her morning's work and made her house tidy, she sat down to have her comfort, as she called it. The moment she saw Gibbie, she rose. He had been the angel Gabriel. Had he been the angel Gabriel come to tell her she was wanted at the throne, her attention could not have been more immediate or thorough. She was rather a little woman and carried herself straight and light. "Oh, you poor outcast," she said in a pitying voice of mother. How have you come to such a height? Or such, anyway. Creature, you have left the world behind you. What would you have here? I have nothing." She didn't have anything in this house, in this cottage. Receiving no answer but one of the child's bewitching smiles, he smiled. She stood for a moment regarding him, not in mere silence, but with a look of dumbness. She was a mother. One who is mother only to her children is not a mother. She is only a woman who has borne children. But here was one of God's mothers. Loneliness and silence and constant homely familiarity with the vast simplicities of nature assist much in the development of the deeper and more wonderful faculties of perception. The perceptions themselves may take this or that shape according to the education, may even embody themselves fantastically, yet be no less perceptions. Now the very moment before Gibbie entered, she had been reading the words of the Lord. "Inasmuch ye have done unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." And with her heart full of them, of these words, right? She lifted her eyes and saw Gibbie for one moment with quick flashing response of the childlike imagination of the Celts, because she's Celtish. She fancied she saw the Lord himself. Another woman might have made a more serious mistake and seen there only a child. God knows what's good for our souls right now. Often had Janet pondered as she sat alone on the great mountain while Robert was with the sheep, her husband Robert. Or she lay awake by his side at night with the wind howling about the cottage, whether the Lord might not sometimes take a lonely walk to look after such solitary sheep of his flock as they, and let them know he had not lost sight of them for all the ups and downs of the hills. There stood the child, and whether he was the Lord or not, he was evidently hungry. Ah, who could tell but the Lord was actually hungry in every one of his hungering little ones? How do we know that it's not Jesus Christ hungry in every one of his little ones? That's the word teknia in Greek, little ones. It's in the passage. 1 John 4:4, I think it is. It says, beloved little ones. Beloved in 1 John 4:1, and then little ones in verse 4. Greater is he that is in you, belonging to God, little ones belonging to God. I think it's there. I didn't look up the Greek, but I've taken Greek, and I think I noticed it, but anyway. In the meantime, only it was but thought time, not clock time, Gibbie stood motionless in the middle of the floor, smiling his innocent smile, asking for nothing, hinting at nothing. He doesn't think she's beholden to give him anything. But resisting his wild, calm eyes with a sense of safety and mother presence upon the gray, thoughtful face of the gazing woman, her awe deepened. It seemed to descend upon her and fold her in as with a mantle. Involuntarily, she bowed her head and, stepping to him, took him by the hand and led him to the stool she had left. There she made him sit while she brought forward her table, white with scrubbing, took from a hole in the wall and set upon it a platter of oat cakes, carried a wooden bowl to her dairy in the rock, through a whitewashed door, and bringing it back, filled half with cream and half with milk, set that also on the table. Then she placed a chair before it and said, "Sit ye down and take. Gan you were the Lord himself." "My bonny man, you may be for aught I know, for you look pure and despised enough by this world, right?" "I could give you no better, for it's all I have to offer you, except maybe be an egg," she added, correcting herself, and turned and went out. Presently she came back with a look of success, carrying 2 eggs, which, having raked out a quantity, she buried in the hot ashes of the peats and left in front of the hearth to roast. Right? You can have fresh roasted eggs. Wow. This is probably the most he's ever had to eat in his life at once, I'm guessing. While Gibbie went on eating the thick oatcake, sweet and substantial, and drinking such milk as the wildest imagination of town boy could never suggest, like this fresh cow's milk and cream, right? It was indeed angel's food such as would have pleased the Lord himself after a hard day with axe and saw and plane. So good and simple and strong was it, because he helped his father as be a carpenter when he was little. Janet resumed her seat on the low 3-legged stool and took her knitting, that he might feel neither that he was watched as he ate, nor that she was waiting for him to finish. Every other moment she gave a glance at the stranger she had taken in, but never a word he spoke, and the sense of mystery grew upon her. Presently came a great bounce and scramble. The latch jumped up, the door flew open, and after a moment's pause, in came a sheepdog, a splendid thoroughbred collie, carrying in his mouth a tiny, long-legged lamb, which he dropped half dead in the woman's lap. It was a late lamb, born of a mother which had been sold from the hill, but had found her way back from a great distance, in order that her coming young one might have the privilege of being yeaned on the same spot where she had herself awakened to existence. Another moment, and her was heard approaching the door. She trotted in, and going up to Janet, stood contemplating the consequence of her maternal ambition. Her udder was full, but the lamb was too weak to suck. Janet rose, going to the side of the room, opened the door of what might have seemed an old press, but was a bed. Folding back the counterpane, she laid the lamb in the bed and covered it over. Then she got a caup, a wooden dish like a large saucer, and into it milked the lamb, right? Next, she carried the cup to the bed, and what means she there used to enable the lamb to drink, the boy could not see, though his busy eyes and loving heart would gladly have taken in all. What is it, Lele? What do you smell? What do you smell? What do you smell, girl? What is it? I think this is my favorite part of the book. One of them. We're on such a high hill, you can't even tell. Maybe you can. The ocean's way below. It's like an hour's walk down. I've walked down there before and back up. I don't know if I walked back up. I think I did. I don't know if I did. I might have Ubered back home from there. Anyway, so he would have taken it all. In the meantime, the collie, having done his duty by the lamb, and perhaps forgotten it, sat on his tail, stared with his two brave, trusting eyes at the little beggar that sat at the master's chair, right? And ate of the fat of the land. Oscar was a gentleman, that's the dog's name, and had never gone to school, therefore neither fancied nor had been taught that rags make an essential distinction and ought to be barked at. Gibbie was a stranger, and therefore as a stranger Oscar gave him welcome. They welcomed strangers there. Now and then stooping to lick the little brown feet that had wandered so far. Like all wild creatures, Gibbie ate fast and had finished everything set before him ere the woman had done feeding the lamb, without a notion of the rudeness of it, his heart full of gentle gratitude. He rose and left the cottage. When Janet turned from her shepherding, there sat Oscar looking up at the empty chair. "What's come of the laddie?" she said to the dog, who answered with a low whine, half regretful, half interrogative. What, just like that? Here, Leia. What is it? What is it? You got it. You can sit here. Come here. It may be he was only asking, like Esau, if there was no residuum of blessing for him also. Like, was there anything left for him to eat? But perhaps he too was puzzled what to conclude about the boy. Janet hastened to the door, but already Gibbie's nimble feet, refreshed to the point of every toe with the food he had just swallowed, had borne him far up the hill behind the cottage so that she could not get a glimpse of him. Thoughtfully she returned and thoughtfully removed the remnants of the meal. She would then have resumed her Bible, but her hospitality had rendered it necessary that she should put on her girdle, not a cincture of leather upon her body, but a dish of iron in the fire, to take thereon cakes ere her husband's return. I think we'll find out. It was a simple enough process, for the oatmeal wanted nothing but water and fire, but her joints had not yet got rid of the winter's rheumatism, and the labor of the baking was the hardest part of the sacrifice of her hospitality. To many, it is easy to give what they have. But the offering of weariness and pain is never easy. They are indeed a true salt to salt sacrifices withal. That it was the last of her meal till her youngest boy should bring her a bag on his back from the mill the next Saturday made no point in her trouble. That's the last of their oatmeal. Come here. Come here. Shh. Good girl. When at last she had done and put the things away and swept the hearth, she milked the ewe lamb, right? Sent her out to nibble, took her Bible, and sat down once more to read. The lamb lay at her feet with his little head projecting from the folds of her new flannel petticoat, and every time her eye fell from the book upon the lamb, she felt as if somehow the lamb was the boy that had eaten of her bread and drunk of her milk. After she had read a while, there came a change, and the lamb seemed the Lord himself, both the lamb and shepherd, who had come to claim her hospitality, right? What a strange day, right? And for us as well, because they came into our life today. Then, divinely invaded with the dread, lest in the fancy she should forget the reality, she kneeled down and prayed to the friend of Martha and Mary and Lazarus to come as he had said and sup with her indeed. Shh, Leah, shh, shh. You're okay. Shh, you're okay. You're okay. That's Jesus, right? Anyway, not for years and years had Janet been to church. She had long been unable to walk so far, and having no book but the best and no help to understand it but the highest, the Holy Spirit unveiled it to her up there, because he worked with what you got, right? Her faith was simple, strong, real, all-pervading. Day by day, she pored over the great gospel. I mean, just the good news according to Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, until she had grown to be one of the noble ladies of the kingdom of heaven, one of those who inherit the earth and are ripening to see God. Hold on. Leah, come here. Just stop it. Come on. Come on. Come on. I'll give you a little leash. Okay, that's it. Stop whining. What she's smelling. She asked to come today. She's just staring at her leash like, you better bring me. To be one of the noble ladies of the kingdom of heaven, one of those who inherit the earth and are ripening to see God. Oh, like the fruits of our spirit are ripening as well. Anyway, for the master and his mind and hers was her teacher. For the master with a capital M, and his mind and hers was her teacher. She had little or no theology save what he taught her, or rather what he is. And of any other than that, the less the better, for no theology except the... Hold on, there's a helicopter. And look, I know Greek, so Theo Logos. It says right here, I'll show you. Where my finger is. It's reflecting, so I can't tell. Oh yeah, where this finger is. Right here. Anyway, it says Theo Logos. That's Theos is God, the Logos, the word. Logos is worth the learning, no other being true. To know him is to know God. And it's Theo with O-U, so I forgot what the U stand, but it's like God, the Logos. And he only who obeys him does or can know him. He who obeys him cannot fail to know him when we obey this love, To Janet, Jesus Christ was no object of so-called theological speculation, but a living man who somehow or other heard her when she called to him and sent her the help she needed. Wow. All right. Chapter 12, Glashgar. Up and up the hill went Gibbie. The path ceased altogether, but when up is the word in one's mind, and up had grown almost a fixed idea with Gibbie. He can seldom be in doubt whether he is going right, even where there is no track. Indeed, in all the more arduous ways, men leave no track behind them. No finger post, there is always but the steepness. Wow. He climbed and climbed. The mountain grew steeper and barer as he went, and he became absorbed in his climbing. All at once he discovered that he had lost the stream. Where or when, he could not tell. All below and around him was red granite rock, scattered over with the chips and splinters detached by air and wind, water and stream, light and heat and cold. Glashgar was only about 3,000 feet in height, but it was the steepest of its group, a huge rock that, even in the midst of masses, suggested solidity. Not once while he ascended had the idea come to him that by and by he should be able to climb no farther. He thought it would go on forever, right? For aught he knew, there were oatcakes and milk and sheep and collie dogs ever higher and higher still. Right? He didn't know. I love this. I can't explain how beautiful this moment is. Thank you, God. I don't know if you could see the palm trees. Anyway. Not until he actually stood upon the peak did he know that there was the earthly hitherto, the final obstacle of unobstancy, the everywhere which, from excess of perviousness, was to human foot impervious. It's okay, Leia. The sun was about 2 hours towards the west when Gibbie, his little legs almost as active as ever, surmounted the final slope. Running up like a child that would scale heaven, he stood on the bare round the head of the mountain and saw with an invading shock of amazement and at first disappointment that there was no going higher. In every direction the slope was downward. He had never been on the top of anything before. He had always been in the hollow of things. Now the whole world lay beneath him. It was cold, and some of the shadows lay snow, weary exile from both the sky and the sea and the ways of them. Captive to the fetters of the cold, prisoner to the mountaintop, but Gibbie felt no cold, and aglow with the climb, which at the last had been hard, his lungs filled with the heavenly air, and his soul with the feeling that he was above everything that was uplifted on the very crown of the earth. He stood in his rags, a fluttering scarecrow, the conqueror of height, the discoverer of immensity, the monarch of space. Nobody knew of such marvel but him. Gibbie had never even heard the word poetry, but nonetheless was he the very stuff out of which poems grow, and now all the latent poetry in him was set a-swaying and heaving, an ocean inarticulate because unobstructed, a might that could make no music, no thunder of waves, because it had no shore, no rocks of thought against which to break in speech. He sat down on the topmost point, right? Like we are. And slowly, in the silence and the loneliness from the unknown fountains of the eternal consciousness, the heart of the child filled. Above him, toward infinitude, immensity potent on his mind, and through shape to his eye in a soaring dome of blue, the one visible symbol informed and ensouled of the eternal to reveal itself thereby. In its center and life lorded the great sun, beginning to cast shadows to the south and east from the endless heaps of the world that lifted themselves in all directions. Down their sides ran the streams, down busily, hasting away through every valley to the Dower, which bore them back to the ocean heart, through woods and meadows, park and waste, rocks and willowy marsh. Behind the valleys rose mountains, and behind the mountains other mountains, more and more, each swathed in its own mystery. And beyond all hung the curtain depth of the sky gulf. Gibbie sat and gazed, and dreamed and gazed. The mighty city that had been to him the universe was dropped and lost, like a thing that was now nobody's, in far, indistinguishable distance. Shh, shh, shh. Yeah. Come here, you. Got tangled up on my leg. There you go. Tangle a little bit. If the clouds weren't there, you'd see like all of that white out there is all ocean. So usually we just see ocean for forever. Hold on, I don't know if these people are coming down here or... Hold on. All right, anyway, it's so funny when we hear people talking about like world talk when we're... All right, so down, broke away, but touched his cheek. Okay, so, okay, that was now nobody's in far indistinguishable distance. And he who had lost it, thus the city is gone now, right? Just like for us, had lost it, had climbed upon the throne of the world. And he who had lost it had climbed upon the throne of the world. The air was still when a breath awoke. It but touched his cheek like the down of a feather, and the stillness was there again. Oh, he might be on the phone. The stillness grew great and slowly descended upon him. It deepened and deepened. Surely it would deepen to a voice. It was about to speak. It was of a great single thought, was the substance of the silence, and was all over and around him, and closer to him than his clothes, than his body, than his hands. I am describing the indescribable, and compelled to make it too definite for belief. The colder speech and experience had come to the child, a link in the chain of his development, glided over the windlass of his uplifting. A change passed upon him. In after years, when Gibbie had the idea of God, when he had learned to think about him, to desire his presence, to believe that a will of love enveloped his will, as the brooding hen spreads her wings over her eggs, so often as he thought of God, as the thought of God came to him, it came in the shape of the silence on the top of Glashgar. As he sat with his eyes on the peak, he had just chosen from the rest as the loftiest of all within his sight. He saw a cloud begin to grow upon it. Hold on. The cloud grew and gathered and descended. Hold on, this guy is like so loud on his phone. This is just like life, right? The cloud grew and gathered. He's going. We only have a few minutes left. The cloud grew and gathered and descended, covering its sides. Okay, so wait. As he sat with his eyes on the peak he had just chosen from the rest as the loftiest of all with his sight, he saw a cloud begin to grow upon it. The cloud grew and gathered and descended, covering its sides as it went, until the whole was hidden. Then swiftly as he gazed, the cloud opened, as it were, a round window in the heart of it, and through that he saw the peak again. So he'd never been up in the clouds before. Right? Look at the clouds coming right now. Can you see them? From the ocean to the valley below. The depth perception's not in this. What is it, Leia? Then swiftly as he gazed, the cloud opened as it were a round window in the heart of it, and through that he saw the peak again. The next moment a flash of blue lightning darted across the opening, and whether Gibbie really saw what follows he never could be sure, but always after, as often as the vision returned, in the flash he saw a rock rolling down the peak. The clouds swept together and the window closed. The next thing, which in after years he remembered, was that the earth, mountains, meadows, and streams had vanished. Everything was gone from his sight except a few yards around him of the rock upon which he sat, and the cloud that hid world and heaven. Then again burst forth the lightning. He saw no flash, but an intense cloud illuminating, accompanied by the deafening crack, and followed by the appalling roar and the roll of thunder. Wow. Nor was it noise alone that surrounded him, for as it were, in the heart and the nest of the storm, the very wind waves that made the thunder rushed and driven bellowing over him and had nearly swept him away. He clung to the rock with hands and feet. The cloud writhed and wrought and billowed and eddied with all the shapes of wind, and seemed itself to be the furnace womb in which the thunder was created. Was this, then, the voice into which the silence had been all the time deepening? Had the presence thus taken form and declared itself? Gibbie had yet to learn that there is a deeper voice still, into which such a silence may grow, and the silence not be broken. He was not dismayed. Shh, shh. Good. He had no conscience of wrong, and scarcely knew fear. He hardly knew fear. It was shh. Yeah. It was awful delight that filled his spirit. Mount Sinai was not to him a terror. To him there was no wrath in the thunder any more than in the greeting of the dog that found him in his kennel. To him there was no being in the sky so righteous as to be more displeased than pitiful over the wrongness of the children whom he had not yet got taught their childhood. Like he wasn't taught anything yet. Gibbie sat calm, awful, but full of awe, right? But I imagine, with a clear forehead and smile-haunted mouth. While the storm roared and beat and flashed and ran about him, it was the very fountain of tempest from the bare crest of the mountain. And water poured down its sides as if springs were in the rock itself and not in the bosom of the cloud above. The tumult at last seized Gibbie like an intoxication. He jumped to his feet and danced and flung his arms about as if he himself were the storm. But the uproar did not last long. Almost suddenly it was gone, as if like a bird that had been flapping the ground in agony, it had at last recovered itself and taken to its great wings and flown. The sun shone out clear, and in all the blue abyss not a cloud was to be seen except far away to leeward, where one was spread like a banner in the lonely air. Stop, Leia. Shh. Shh. Good girl. And in sign of the charging storm, bearing for its device a segment of the many-colored bow. Like a rainbow, I think. Yeah, the rainbow. And now that its fierceness was over, the jubilation in the softer voices of the storm became audible. As the soul gives thanks for the sufferings that are overpast, offering the love and faith and hope which the pain has stung into fresh life, so from the sides of the mountain ascended the noise of the waters the cloud had left behind. The sun had kept on his journey. The storm had been no disaster to him, and now he was a long way down the west, and twilight in her gray cloak would soon be tracking him down from the east like sorrow, dogging delight. Gibbie, wet and cold, began to think of the cottage where he had been so kindly received. Oh, can you hear the band? There's a band at that school with the field. They're about to play a game. God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Anyway, a long way down the west, the twilight in her gray cloak would soon be, we're almost finished with the chapter, tracking him from the east like sorrow, dogging delight. Gibbie, wet and cold, began thinking of the cottage which he had been so kindly received, of the friendly face of its mistress, and her care of the lamb. It was not that he wanted to eat. He did not even imagine more eating, for never in his life had he even eaten twice of the same charity in the same day. What he wanted was to find some dry hole in the mountain and sleep as near the cottage as he could. So he rose and set out. But he lost his way, came upon one precipice after another, down which only a creeping thing could have gone, was repeatedly turned aside by torrents and swampy places, and when the twilight came, was still wandering upon the mountain. At length he found, as he thought, the burn. Leah, shh, Leah. Along whose bank he had ascended in the morning and followed it toward the valley, looking out for the friendly cottage. But the first indication of abode he saw was the wall of the grounds of the house, through whose gate he had looked in the morning. He was then a long way from the cottage and not far from the farm, and the best thing he could do was to find again the barn where he had slept so well the night before. You know, where the cheese was, do you remember? This was not very difficult, even in the dusky night. He skirted the wall. Shh, Leah, stop it. Come here. Stop whining. Stop. Come here. He skirted the wall, came to his first guide, found and crossed the valley stream, descended it until he thought he recognized the slope of clover down which he had run in the morning. He ran up the brae, and there was the solemn cones of corn ricks between him and the sky. A minute more, and he had crept through the cat hole and was feeling about in the dark barn. Happily, the heap of straw was not yet removed. Gibbie shot into it like a mole and burrowed to the very center. There coiled himself up and imagined himself lying in the heart of the rock on which he sat during the storm, and listened to the thunder winds over his head. The fancy enticed the sleep, which before was readily enough to come, and he was soon far stiller than Ariel in the cloven pine of Crorax. I don't know that story. Anyway, chapter 13 is next, the ceiling. All right, much love. Thanks for being here. I gotta run. Make sure to like the videos. I think I'm not teaching not my people, but the people that come across here to make a habit of doing that. I think it's important. It's just a kindly thing to do on each of my videos as you watch them. Thank you. Much love.